Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to our behaviour webinar. I hope you're all very well and looking forward to the discussion as much as I am. So our aim for today is to bring some insight and experience to bear on the question of how retailers should factor mobile app and mobile web technologies together as they start to try and build a highly effective mobile channel. My name is Ollie Cooper and I'm one of the founders of eCommerce, and I'm going to be chairing the panel today. And I'm delighted to be joined by three esteemed industry veterans to talk our way through the issues, and I'm sure deliver an insight or two along the way as well. So to introduce everybody, from the world of big retail we have Benji Mayer.
Hello everyone.
Benji has a fantastic breadth of experience across the world of e-commerce, starting off with Tesco's forays into online retailing, and trying to sell fresh groceries to Californians, but maybe we'll skip over that, Benji. He then moved on to become the head of customer journey strategy at Marks & Spencer's and went on to perform a similar role at Majestic Wines. And actually since then he's taken the huge step of starting his own venture with Venue Scanner, which is essentially like Airbnb for booking meeting and event venues. I'm also delighted to be welcoming Sam Carter.
Hi everyone.
Whose experience at Groupon and Phosphor has mainly been down in the kind of nitty-gritty detail of customer journey optimization. Sam's career has all been about the fine point tooling of the customer experience at each stage driving towards optimum conversion. So his views on how retailers place mobile apps and mobile websites together in that journey, I'm sure will be very valuable indeed. And finally, we're very lucky to have Lionel Mora join us from Google.
Hi guys.
So no event that hopes to shed some light on this topic would be quite complete without a view from the company that shapes so much about how we discover, shop, are advertised to, and indeed place advertising online. Lionel leads the mobile acceleration team at Google across Europe, the Middle East and Africa, and he's the author of several unfortunately embargoed papers on the mobile app versus mobile web debate. I do hope he's going to let slip one or two juicy details today. So thanks very much for joining us today, guys. Okay, so there's a brief reminder on your screens of where the differences between mobile websites and mobile apps lie. Now this is by no means a comprehensive or indeed an unimpeachable list, and there's plenty of fantastic literature out there which will go into greater depth on the debate. But just to frame up the debate very briefly, when we refer to mobile web experiences, we're talking about customers accessing mobile optimized websites via a browser, whether that's Safari or Chrome, or the in-app browser of a social network like Facebook, for instance. And when we talk about apps, we're talking about discrete applications that are downloaded via Google Play or the Apple App Store. And we're going to also discuss a little bit about the exciting new technology, progressive web apps or PWAs, something that's becoming available to retailers as part of the mix, but we'll leave that to later because I think it probably deserves its own section. Okay, so throughout the webinar there'll be some polls popping up on your screen. Do take part. There's a few different questions that'd be fascinating to see the responses to. And as part of the follow-up from this webinar, we'll send out the results. Okay, so here are the four topics that we're going to be covering. First of all, we're going to be talking about how attitudes about mobile have changed in retail over the last few years. Secondly, we'll move on to talk about how consumer behaviour differs on the two different technologies, mobile apps versus mobile web. We'll also then move on our third topic to talk about whether apps have won the battle and indeed whether or not there is a battle to be won. And finally, in our fourth topic, we'll look at progressive web apps and talk about whether or not they're going to be complementary or threatening to the other technologies. With each topic, you'll see some key facts or quotes on your screen which will help set up the discussion as well. Okay. So let's get into it with our first topic. So neither mobile web nor mobile apps are new technologies by most standards of new. I mean, the smartphone obviously been around for many years, mobile adaptive websites similarly. And there's quite a bit of history in terms of the adoption of the technologies with retailers and quite a lot of debate in the past about how we actually use them. And at various times we have seen, retailers have seen, stakeholders within retailers have seen pressure to prioritise one over the other. So let's talk a little bit about how the debate stands as of today. So Sam, maybe I could ask you to start off. From your perspective with Groupon and with Foster, how have attitudes about mobile changed in the retail industry over the last few years?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's a lot of excitement, both from a customer and from a channel perspective. Starting with the customer, I guess from an app perspective, is what it means in terms of the customer itself. There's a certain stickiness, there's a lifetime value, there's a sense of permanence. And above all, I think there's a sense that you're pushing people towards buying by discovery rather than having to push through often expensive marketing channels. A sense of an app as a sort of a source of discovery, and also from a channel perspective, there's the emergence of push notifications, and certainly from a Groupon perspective to offset some of the declines in the email channel over the years, very important channel to Groupon. Yeah. The emergence of push notification and its power was very appealing. I think with that there was also a sense of nervousness, like not wanting to make some of the same mistakes that we made with email marketing. Also a need to really accelerate personalization efforts, so that we're moving away from generic messages, often just discount codes and sales, to actually relevant messages to that customer. And then finally nervousness because it's another channel, it's another means by which a user can interact with your brand, and therefore sort of understanding the finer details of how much you're spending on acquiring and retaining that customer, how much they're worth across multiple devices, sessions, channels becomes more difficult. So excitement and nervousness.
Sure. But a sense there from you of very practical problems, right? And not just a sort of philosophical debate about which technology do we bet on, but actually how do we attribute value? How do we weave it into our existing processes? Is that fair?
For sure. And how do you make it relevant? How do you make it thematically sound? Or what does mobile offer that's different? How can you play to the power of tapping people up on the go?
Yeah, brilliant. Benji, how about from your perspective?
So change in attitudes, I mean, if I think about it from the retailer's perspective, which is where I've spent a lot of my time, I'd say probably still very slow. So there's been a lot of change, but in retail organisations there's so much more potential. I've probably done it myself, but a lot of other senior people from within retailers standing on a stage in front of their own teams or at conferences saying, we're mobile first, but they're not. So whenever they're doing user experience design, wireframing, it's always desktop first and it's mobile last. Amazon have become the masters of the find shopping mission. I know exactly what I want, I need it now, I press 2 buttons and I'm done. Nobody has really become the master of the discovery shopping mission, and that's a huge opportunity still in retailers. So most retailers have got a long way to go to catch up with Amazon on that find mission, and nearly all retailers have got a long way to go on that discovery mission. That's where I think your business, Ollie, Bijou, is doing some really good stuff to create some difference and some opportunity there for the consumer and for the retailer as well.
Thanks very much for the plug there, Benji.
Sorry.
I guess the thing that emerges there is a sense of untapped potential, right? Not necessarily of thinking about the bleeding edge technologies. How do we get on and adopt the technology, but more about how do we make this work for our business and what potential customer journeys does it open up, right?
Yeah, the attitude is there. People want it in their businesses. Frankly, there's no technological barrier to doing a wireframe for a mobile first, or for ensuring that you can type a coupon code in a till that a user has on their mobile phone. All that technology is there. It's the how, it's the kind of mindset, it's the KPIs, it's the difficulty of measuring the use of mobile in store, which presents some challenges for the multi-channel retailers.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe sometimes, I don't know what you guys think, but maybe sometimes there's also a perception problem of mobile as an opportunity. Like, maybe a couple of years ago we were thinking about mobile as mobile is not really converting, it's not really working for retail, it's not really working for the business. But what we see now is that it is converting, and a lot of the growth is actually coming from mobile. So, for instance, at Google, we see like a lot of our clients and partners, they are seeing like huge numbers coming from mobile. So this is becoming a fact, and now we hear everywhere, mobile first, as you mentioned. So I think right now the opportunity is here, and there is no question about it. It's just if you keep thinking about desktop and designing for desktop, for instance, and not improving the mobile experience, you're missing a big opportunity as a retailer.
And do you think, Leo and guys, do you think that this is something where we've been missing, like that set of amazing case studies from blue chip retailers to really push stuff through, or do you just think it's the pace of change and people waiting for proof points around conversion, as you mentioned?
I think so. That's probably a bit tricky, because I guess if we talk specifically about retail, and if you have massive retailers having their own their own secrets on how to make it work, how to make mobile work for them, it's always hard to surface this and show exactly how things work. However, I think looking at some available information out there, you see retailers being incredibly successful on mobile. The last example I have in mind, because I saw a video about it like a couple of days ago, is a large fashion French retailer who's called Showroom Privé, and they're driving 60% of their revenue from mobile.
Wow, yeah.
That's massive.
Yeah.
So I think that's a typical example of we start seeing companies and partners telling this story, and I think that's a big proof that the opportunity is here.
I think here in the UK, a lot of businesses think it's a thing that young people do, and therefore it's a bit cool and a bit quirky, and they're not taking it really seriously. I always forget the name of the business. It begins with an M, and it's an Indian-based fashion retailer. They closed their desktop site, so they are 100% mobile, and that just gives you a sense of where the world is going. Forget a few of us sitting here in London who might think it's kind of let's hire some cool kids who can help us build a mobile app. This is serious stuff.
Sure.
It's also, I think, comes down to conceptual soundness again. Just like, do you have a reason for an app? And some businesses are designing. Groupon, for example, would be a good example of one where it makes total sense. It's trying to lead in bringing local businesses online. But I think often we see kind of square pegs and round holes where people are trying to take their product to an app when they've not really worked out exactly why.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. Actually, that's a great segue onto our second topic. That was completely unplanned. Thanks. But yeah, the idea that to try and avoid situations where you're picking a technology for the sake of the technology. Oh, we need an app, right? We're mobile first. We better have an app, rather than thinking about the consumer behaviours and the business objectives that you're really trying to drive. So guys, onto the second topic then, in earnest. We know that these two technologies, mobile apps and mobile web, enable different kinds of user experiences purely by dint of the limits of each of the two technologies. The ability of apps to take advantage of native features to the phone, like the camera, processing power, and so on. We know that mobile web is catching up, but there still remains a different set of technological tools on those two platforms. But it seems to me, and perhaps to you guys, that in a user and customer-centric world, we really ought to be thinking in terms of user behaviour and customer expectations rather than on the basis of technologies. So, in your experience, how does consumer behaviour tend to differ on a mobile app compared to mobile web? And Benji, maybe we'll start with you.
Mobile app versus mobile web.
Yeah.
So I think from my experience, mobile app is absolutely going to tend to, in current times, have your more loyal customers using it. So if you're a retailer, you'll probably find that your most loyal customers are those who have adopted it, which is natural, and as a result, you'll be seeing higher frequency and higher average order values in app than in mobile web. So it's kind of a bit of a self-fulfilling thing, but absolutely that migration of users from mobile web to mobile app ought to be something that you can use in order to drive loyalty of your less loyal customers. Now, why are they more loyal? Because they're in the app. They were more loyal in the first place, but having the app on their phone, the frequency of use of that app, the ease of login, just remove friction points for that user, having their favourites saved in there, whether it's Marks and Spencer or Ocado, having a lot of really intuitive ways of bringing up their history and previous conversations they might have had with the central contact centre or fashion advisor, fashion stylist. There's all sorts of ways in which the app can enhance that experience and create more touch points and more connectivity with the customer ultimately.
Yeah, and fundamentally, I guess a lot of that stems from the fact that there is a much greater investment on the part of the end user to actually go to the app store, download something and have the app on their phone. I mean, there's all sorts of data around this. The latest data I saw was something like the average user has around 28 apps on their phone that are not part of the core app package, and most people, the sort of the median number of new apps that people download on a monthly basis is zero, right? People stick to what they know, what they like, and what they enjoy, and so therefore an app has to justify its position on the phone, unlike a website, which is a one-off. So Leo, how does this question shape up in your experience?
So I think I guess it's kind of from the same perspective, except that in Benji's experience, it's probably on your own product, and you see what your users are doing. From a Google perspective, what we've been doing recently is that we had a sort of user research that we run across 8 markets across Europe. So it was like a study that we did with Ipsos, and we tried to understand, it's actually, is it exactly this question? It was trying to understand the differences in usage from mobile sites to mobile apps, and what we see is that what the research confirms is that people actually prefer to use a mobile site for browsing activities.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it is searching for a product, searching for information, or comparing price, for example, that's what came out from this research. Whereas apps are much preferred for sort of direct actions, whether it is for purchase or for retrieving an account or this kind of things. And I think one of the big findings as well from the research, which I think will be interesting for the audience of the webinar, is that we see a huge perception gap between mobile sites and apps when it comes to content. So something that came out of the research for retail specifically is that people think that there is less information within the app than there is on a website. And this is driving a change in behavior as well. So that's a good thing to know, I think, because once you know that there is a perception gap, you can start changing whether, it can start having an impact on your acquisition. You can start, shaping your messaging a little bit different. You can start focusing on, having exclusive content or more content within the app, or just stress that a little bit more. So I think that's one thing that came out, and that shows also, like, maybe it can explain also the different kind of behavior that we see between the two.
Sure. Yeah, and I guess one of the content point is fascinating actually, and it speaks to that sort of quite differentiated experience between mobile web and mobile app, that's not necessarily led by technology but led by user expectations, right? But one of the sort of, in the app world, the old toothbrush test, like to justify an app you need to be using it twice a day, you need to take action in the queue for Starbucks or whatever cliche you choose to apply to it. Is there a number of uses or a frequency of use that you need to justify an app, do you think? Like, is it 5 times a month? Is it twice a month? Or what is it? Or is that too simplistic?
I think I think for retailers specifically, it comes back to, again, what sort of value are you able to offer to your users? Like, you were mentioning before, Sam, what it would be for Groupon, or we were talking already about push notifications. I think if it's up to the amount of value that you're able to provide to your customers. I think if you understand that your users are actually willing to discover exclusive content or new collections, if it's about fashion or anything else, or if you understand their context at some point, and that comes back to acquisition or to engagement. If you understand the specific context of your users and you understand them clearly, and you see that I don't know, they're buying one fashion item every week, for instance. Well, I think that's enough to justify like a great app experience, for instance, whether it is an app or something.
I think in the world of fashion, where mobile can really play a part is in this notion of 60 seconds of distraction, is what we used to refer it to as. So I'm sitting on the bus, I'm sitting on the tube, or I'm doing something, and that's my 60 seconds of distraction. I've got 1 minute. I'll tell you what, I'll pop into the M&S app and I'll see what the daily edit is. It's like what's been recommended that day by whatever one of our editors for each of the various departments that we sold. And we saw traction with that really pick up, and it's something that's quite hard to do through mobile web, because people don't want an email every day reminding them what the daily edit is. Do you know what, if I remember, I know I can just go straight into the app, and I'm in, and it's on the home screen, and there's the daily edit, and it's literally like 200 words of writing and some pictures. It is 60 seconds of distraction, and I'll learn about all the new great products they're developing and the new ways they're doing interesting work with sustainable farmers in Mongolia, etc., etc. And as a result, I feel increasingly loyal to the app, and I can share it with my friends, etc.
And Benji, from a retailer's perspective, how valuable is it that you are on your app icon, and therefore your brand is on the real estate of the screen, i.e. something that's being picked up by users hundreds and hundreds of times a day? Is that important? Does that factor in? Because that's not something you get if you need to go through Chrome or Safari.
I think it is important, but it's only going to be important once the user has had a trigger for a customer mission that's in the realm. So if I've never thought of fashion as something I want to do today, there's no point in having that M&S app on my phone. But as soon as I've thought of fashion, if I've organised my apps in shopping and M&S is on screen 1 and Next is on screen 2, then it's obviously going to help in that regard. So yes, there's value in it, but something like M&S would be, whilst it's a frequent use, it's nothing like as frequent as the trainline.com for users, or the London Tube map. So it's really just dependent on a little bit of how much the user would use that app compared to other apps on their phone. If they're a high heavy user, then it's a little bit different.
So yeah, I think it's worth also considering that even if you've got a loyal customer and you don't have an app, that you might pay for them to come every time every time they visit your site.
Right.
People continue to Google. Direct is the holy grail of channels, right? It's someone going direct to your brand. No one's born and goes and directly knows that you can go to M&S. So I think that when you talk about the real estate, I think it is important. Obviously, once you've got the engagement, I think that the idea that you have a free, and as I said, this holy grail of channels sitting there on the home screen is ideal. And one of the huge draws of Groupon was, the majority of app traffic was direct push notification, and that's always the sort of the litmus test that you're doing something right if customers are coming directly to you.
And how well developed is that attribution certainly within Groupon, your role very much to do with attribution, channel attribution. Yeah. How well developed is the technology around tracking and quantifying the impact of that?
Yeah, well, it's getting better, and certainly some of the focus of Phosphor is on this visitor level information. I think that when I talked about the nervousness, it's because most retailers don't have that yet have that sort of visitor level information where they understand the true sort of interaction, the flow of a customer across devices, across channels, and it's fundamental, particularly when we talk about the sort of the excitement of the potential lifetime value of an app user, really understanding who that user is and how much you've already paid for them. Is fundamental. So yes, a huge focus for us is helping businesses to understand the exact interactions between channels and the exact cost of a customer, and the role therefore that an app plays in the overall customer journey.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an important consideration. Leo's smiling in over the site, and the people get directed over and over through mobile web, and it's a search-led journey, and Google obviously likes it to be a search-led journey. Okay, interesting. All right, let's move on maybe to the next question. So, which of these two technologies, mobile apps and mobile web, is winning? And actually, is there a battle at all? Let's focus on a quote from a kind of state of mobile report from Yahoo that came out around the full 2016 year, which was, we spend 3 hours and 40 minutes per day on our phones, and 90% of it is spent in apps. It's an app world, the web just lives in it, which is a somewhat provocative statement. So guys, have apps won the battle for attention? And if they have, where does that leave retailers? Leo?
So it's not because I don't like Yahoo or Criteo, right? That it has nothing to do with this. No, I would start by saying that it's tough, and I know it would be ideal to say, okay guys, you know what? Like, forget about everything, go and build an app, and that's gonna be the solution, right? Or a mobile site. But I think like looking at apps versus M-site, unfortunately, it's not helping things, because in the world where progressive web apps, for instance, are not in the world where progressive web apps are the perfect format, and it does everything you need as a retailer and so on. Well, okay, maybe you only need this then, but it's not the case today. It's still moving a lot, and it's still quite complicated. So I think as long as progressive web apps, for instance, are not becoming a standard, it's hard to say, okay, there is apps versus M-sites, and I think we need to think more about it as a complementary combination. Now, that would bring me to say, like, if you have an app today, the question is, how do you leverage it, and how do you make sure that it has the maximum impact on your business, on your revenue, if you're a retailer. So that becomes a very different conversation. That becomes a conversation around user acquisition, for instance, and Sam, you just mentioned understanding what your users are doing, what is valuable within your app for your business, like what's the lifetime value of your users, how much did you pay for them, and how much can you pay for them. I think those are questions that are still really tough to answer. And again, if you have an app today, those are the kind of questions that you should think about, because there is a massive opportunity. Just before I was talking about show and privé, it's again a good example, because not only do they drive 60% of their revenue on mobile, they drive 40% of their revenue from the app. And they are one of the examples out there that are telling we are app first. So it exists, and they succeed in doing this. I could find out other examples who are really leveraging mobile sites, and what we see today, I think, is a combination of both is working. We'll see how it goes in the future, but right now, I think it's like that.
Sam?
I think you mentioned this sort of the holistic view, and I think that's the important thing. It's thinking about the role that each one plays in the specific customer's journey. I mean, there's nothing more annoying for me as a browser than being deep linked into an app when I'm in discovery mode. I'm talking about TripAdvisor, always pushing me towards their app, and I'm searching. So I mean, just thinking about the distinct role that each channel plays, and they might not always be complementary, but they should be, and that should be part of your strategy. So We never really saw it at Groupon as a battle between channels. We always looked at our sort of mobile web and app and considered that to be our sort of our mobile combined. We obviously, the more important thing was we understood the interactions between the channels and yeah, how a journey kind of progressed, and was it logical and was it seamless and frictionless.
Sure. And I guess a great kind of way to sum up the muddying of the waters in this whole debate is that, you know, the stats that are referred to, the 90% of our time is spent in app. Well, a huge amount of that time is spent actually in a browser, but a browser queued up and started by the app that you're in. I'm sure a very significant chunk of that is Facebook time, for instance, where you happen to be off on the mobile web. So the picture's not so clear as perhaps people writing headlines and reports maybe would like it to be. And I'm sure they have a nuanced view, just as you do, Sam. Benji, anything else from you on this?
Yeah, I mean, just on the Yahoo or the Criteo stats, the first thing is that includes every kind of sector we're in. So I use my email app more than any other app on my iOS phone, right? So I'm in that for probably 90% of the time. So that's skewing some of those things. I think first thing to say on the app versus web debate is genuinely, I mean, we're a kind of bunch of semi-nerdy, geeky, I think neek is the new phrase, types in the room. Most consumers don't know if they're in an app or a mobile web. If you asked everyone in the country, they are clueless. The second thing I would say is that it just comes back again to frequency and loyalty for me, or the things which make an app really add value. So if I need something on a regular basis, the app is always going to win for me. So, you know, the things that I'm using every day, I feel like I get a better experience from them if I'm in the app than on the web typically. Yesterday I just downloaded a couple of apps for things that I've started to use more frequently, and it's just so much easier. I don't need to log in every time. I know exactly where I am, where to find stuff. The second part is, if you're thinking about a physical store, there are things which only an app can do, and mobile web increasingly can do it. So 4 years ago or so, HTML5 got to know my location, whereas previously that was only possible in app. But there are still some things which are only really doable in app. So when it comes to beacons and having, you know, conversations with someone who's in a store on the other side, who might be a colleague who could come and help you, bring you some help. So there are various bits of functionality which I think are only really app doable. So they're the other examples where kind of app would add more value than mobile web on its own. But ultimately, I can't really think of a retailer or a brand that only has very, very, very loyal customers. So on that basis, you're going to need a bit of both, because the high frequency guys, the highly loyal people, will make use of the app, but you need to recruit people into that app, and you've got to have a mobile web that is really performant to create that engagement.
Okay, so I guess our conclusion on that topic is there's not really a battle to be won, and there's a series of, unfortunately for decision makers, there's a series of factors involving technology, involving what you have already, involving your typical user journeys and frequency. Not a 90% of times in apps, so apps have won. So there's our conclusion there. And just to muddy the waters further, we'll now go on to talk about progressive web apps, which is a technology that arrives with a lot of hype, a little bit of confusion about exactly what it is and what it can do for retailers, and a technology that potentially carries the promise of being the white knight, the problem solver that will come through and unite all the technologies. But first, let's just take stock a little bit and have a very quick and by no means comprehensive summary of the basics of progressive web apps or PWAs. So essentially, what we're talking about is a hybrid of a mobile app and a mobile web. It's something that can be saved as a shortcut and look like an app on the phone, on the smartphone. To Benji's point, do consumers know or even care whether they're in an app or a mobile website? Well, this blurs the lines even further. It's something that can adapt to user behaviour and cleverly can be a very modular experience where parts of app-like functionality can be downloaded one at a time to make sure that the user is getting the pieces of functionality that matter to them at the time that they want to use them. It does carry the ability to deliver push notifications, which for a long time was kind of a deal breaker between mobile app and mobile web, and it also can work offline, another kind of traditional deal breaker. There's no installation from the app stores required. They can be delivered by link, and there's all sorts of clever ways that people are thinking about deploying them. So far so good. Unfortunately, iOS Apple not currently supporting them on iPhones, but there's lots of noises coming out from them that they will, and there are many analyst voices saying not just that they will, but that they must. So guys, PWAs, are they a white knight? Are they going to come and destroy mobile app and mobile web, or how does that work? Leo, let's start off with you.
I think so. I think at the moment it's probably complementary to apps. But so my own point of view is that it's making huge progress already, and if it keeps doing that, it will probably at some point replace a lot of things if we talk about retailers. Because if you think about it, and you guys have listed a couple of the advantages of what progressive web app could bring to businesses, I think at some point if they are equivalent or even better than apps, then the debate is almost over, right? Because for some sectors like gaming, it's always going to be probably tricky. But for retailers, it will probably be quite disruptive. Now, I think something we need to really clarify, because it's another buzzword and we're going to hear more and more about it, and it feels like we're going to need to start everything again because there's this new thing, progressive web app. Like, what do I need to do? Do I need to hire another 10 developers to build a new thing? I think it needs to be very clear that progressive web apps are just it's a set of technologies that enable you to turn your mobile site, for example, into something that is closer to an app. I think that's probably a simpler way of looking at it, and you start seeing some resources online and stuff that tells you how to do it in a very few steps. So you have checklists and so it's more principles that you can apply with some pieces of technologies to your mobile site, so that it becomes closer to an app with offline functionalities, push notification, full screen mode. As you mentioned, you can also have it on your home screen. You have a more fluid experience with you have motions at 60 frames per second, for instance, which was so far only available on an app. So that's the way I would put it. And yes, it can have a massive impact. Now it's probably going to take a bit of time.
And further to that point, to blur the lines even further, if you're a developer of native apps on Android, it's pretty simple to turn those into modular PWAs that can function a little bit like a website as well. So to bridge across both of those technologies from a technology standpoint, that's really exciting. So we've created an exciting vision of the future where PWAs can do all the singing and dancing that we need them to do. Benji, from a multi-channel retailer perspective right now, where do PWAs register and how are you thinking about them?
So back in 2012, with my team, we built the first hybrid app, which basically had a sort of mobile web within mobile app for any major retailer in the UK, and I can very clearly articulate that if we had PWAs back in that time, then we would absolutely have been employing the technology. It sounds really, really promising. I think there's some work to do to prove things, but I'll just come back to the point I made a little while ago, which is that the user doesn't know where they are. They don't know if they're in mobile web or mobile app. So if you think about it in the world of the user, they just want more and better functionality. Yeah, we need to all behind the scenes find the right technology to help them do that. Where I think PWAs could really help is effectively in the welcome process for a new customer into a business. So you use us for the first time, or it's your first time coming with this airline or with a retailer, and we want to convert you into a repeat customer. We want to engage you with the product that you just bought, leave your ratings and reviews, and moving them slowly into an app experience sounds great. That notion of conversational commerce, where you can ask questions back to the advisor in store who helped you with your new outfit, or whoever onboarded you onto the plane, whatever it might be, that conversational commerce piece is a really important opportunity. I think it sounds to me like a no-brainer for pure play retailers, so where I'm purely in that online retailer space, possibly a little bit harder for the true multi-channel retailers. And I'm only really saying that because I think there's a bit more to be proven in terms of the micro-location aspects of geolocation and knowing where I am in a store, wanting to trigger me with different advice and offers, or wanting to chat with somebody over mobile when stood in a store, etc. So we don't really know yet enough about NFC, and near-field communication and payment and micro-location, use of the camera. There's just still a bit to be proven. And there's just one fundamental thing for me which is playing a little bit on my mind, which is when a user gets a new phone, the app will not automatically download to their screen like a regular app would. And I think that really needs to be cracked, because otherwise retailer will have spent however many months and pounds onboarding, welcoming a user to then lose them just because they went and bought a new phone as part of their annual or every 2-year upgrade. So slam dunk for pure play, a little bit of work to do on multi-channel retailers. Got to try and crack the new phone syndrome. That's my view.
Great. And Sam?
Yeah, I think I'll probably echo what both Benji and Leo have said here. I think my default is to echo the party line here of Leo's point that everything has to be complementary. Yeah, like 60% of customers start on one channel and move over to another. I think that probably points to Benji's point, which is customers don't care, they don't differentiate, and it's therefore just important that retailers are winning on the channels that they're investing in. It sounds like there's a long road to go on the functionality. It sounds exciting, but I think one final observation here would be I wouldn't underestimate the difficulty of downloading an app as a potential valuable point. There's something I mentioned around the kind of the stickiness earlier on, like that's really attractive to retail, knowing that a customer has overcome some kind of hurdles. In my case, to be in the hallowed library of my shopping folder on my phone, which is a finite space and a finite attention span. So actually, the investment in that, like really committing to getting somebody to download an app, and what that tells you about the customer and the type of customer that you're generating. I think I wouldn't always look for necessarily the path of least resistance is the most valuable. I think one of the exciting things is the power of app as a channel because of the type of customer it generates.
Fantastic.
I think also what this debate ought to do for a company like a retailer is bring the mobile app team into the mainstream. So Leo was telling me in the lift earlier on the way up here that users perceive that the information available in an app is worse or less than the information available on a mobile website. So for example, I'm looking at a page with a bottle of red wine from Argentina on it. I don't necessarily need it on the front screen, but I should be able to get all the same information in the app as I can on the website, all the tasting notes, all the reviews and the recommendations from experts. It all needs to be there, and too often I think you'll find there's a mobile apps team that's sitting in the corner. They're the guys in all the colourful t-shirts and the cool trainers, and they've been hired to do the mobile app, but they're not integrated into the business, and they absolutely need to be, so that when you are migrating from desktop to store to touchscreen to mobile web to mobile app, it's the same everywhere, and it's not even treated as a different channel. And that's when mobile's really been, it's not even first at that point, it's just integrated, and a lot of retailers see it as a different thing, and it should be driving their business, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, Leo, anything else?
Yeah, just one last thing, because you mentioned like what we need is Benji, you said like what we need is start seeing proofs and stuff. I think we start seeing a couple of them. I think it's like especially for pure players actually, and I think it's a very strong point, because one of the main cases that we look at internally, for instance, at Google, that has been using progressive web app, and we've been sort of involved with them on how they've been performing on that and so on. Is AliExpress. I guess like a lot of you guys know them, and I learned that they are the seventh most visited e-commerce site in the UK, sitting between like John Lewis and I don't know who, which is quite an interesting number. And they have a progressive web app, and so what they've been seeing is a massive stat. It's 104% increase in conversion across all browsers, which is it's true that it's not necessarily well supported on Safari, but some of the functionalities are already available. And I think like seeing such a company taking the step of progressive web apps, trying it and testing and seeing results is already a good thing to be aware of, because they are quite they're quite an important name.
Absolutely. And again, the sense of a case study driving home that point to the rest of the market. There's nothing like finding out your competitor is doing something exciting and effective with the new technology. And hopefully there's more case studies that bring that stuff to life, certainly from a selfish point of view, a technology provider point of view, that there are those great case studies out there, and that companies are allowing those out into the open to a certain extent. Okay, so we've come to the end really of our 4 main question topics. Thanks guys very much for your contributions. And I think the picture that we've painted over the last 45 minutes or so is a reasonably nuanced one. There isn't an easy answer, even when it comes to the sort of white knight technology of PWAs. There's a bit of waiting, there's a bit of discovery, there's some case studies to emerge. And I guess if I can summarise on behalf of everybody, the view is that unfortunately it's all about knowing your customer, it's all about adapting your mobile channel and placing several different technologies together in harmony to really get the most out of the channel, and what that means will vary from retailer to retailer. Okay, so I think we've just got a little bit of time for questions. We've had some questions sent in, and I guess what we'll do is just jump to 2 or 3 of them, and in the time remaining. So something that was touched on just a little bit actually, which is an interesting area, is why haven't apps had more of an impact in connecting in store and online? And I guess the other thing to add to that, if I may, is can PWAs change some of that? Benji, maybe you want to take that one.
Sure. So I think that an app ought to play a really big role in triggering consumers to go to store, and could play a really big role once in the store. Or if you don't have the app on your phone, towards the end of your interaction and transaction, a really good opportunity for the retailer to encourage you to download the app as you complete your transaction. So there's sort of 3 different models, if you like. I mean, I could reel off hundreds of different examples of things which are useful to do with an app in a store environment, but ultimately I think that it will depend by retailer. So a fashion retailer is going to be very different to a food retailer, okay? But it's about continuing the conversation that you can have with a user between store visits. So if you think about the more loyal customer, how do I stay connected with her or with him after he or she's left the store and get them to come back again and again? One of the really nice simple examples I like is there's a French DIY retailer I can't remember the name of, but was one of the first to implement a WhatsApp-like messaging within their app, and it meant that you could continue the conversation with the person that helped you in the store about your project that you're trying to build and ask them what screws or what nuts you need. And it's just such a nice simple feature, but it meant that you didn't feel like you were talking to somebody in a contact centre. You were able to continue the conversation with the person who served you. That's an example of something that you could do through mobile web, but it just works so much more seamlessly in an app environment. there's loads and loads of retailers out there who talk about and have experimented with somebody being stood in one part of the store and therefore being needed to be incentivized to have a discount on that thing they're looking at, or be incentivized to go to another bit of the store. Frankly, I think that's a little bit daft and a little bit thoughtless and a little bit too bribey. But the information that you can start to do with micro-location, dwell time, really starts to teach you and give you information about that customer and how often they're interested in different areas of the store, and just opportunities to start a conversation with them. It's not all about discount codes and promos, but just the information you can collect from that app can help bring a lot of insight to your business.
Sure. So lots of opportunities there.
Huge, yeah.
Great. Let's take another question. So, how about Sam? Why did we look at this one? In case you decide to go for a mobile app, the biggest chestnut around, how do you make people download it?
Well, which follows on nicely from what Benji was saying around discount codes and promos. I mean, the most obvious lever is to give somebody a discount incentive, but certainly from my group on time and as something I've taken over to Phosphor is approaching with real caution the idea of you're getting very excited about the potential lifetime value of an app customer and immediately thinking, well, I can spend more to acquire this download. The temptation, and we certainly had at the Groupon, was you over incentivize for app download. So if you've got a sale on, do 15% for a web purchase and 25% for an app, it's worth it. But without really an understanding of what that actually does to the lifetime value of the customer. So I mean, it's certainly a lever. It's one that I would preach real caution on. What we tended to prefer and I'd always recommend is something that's in keeping with the theme, something thematically sound, or something we did a Groupon was like what makes sense as a mobile first deal. So we ran promotions with Starbucks, a very mobile type of deal. It was a £10 voucher, and it was conceptually sound to be mobile first. It was a hugely engaging brand and big seller, and offer an exclusive selling window first. And then for an offline store as well, give people some incentive to want the app. There's maybe VIP events going on in stores, or there's some kind of exclusivity, so you will only hear about it first if you get an app, and it pushes this thing I mentioned earlier on about this. You want people to download an app so they can discover things, and so that they come to you. You don't want it just because you're doing it for $5 cheaper.
Sure. Yeah, that's great, and some very practical tips in there.
And I guess there's also to that point. There's also a sort of media element, like when we talk about like organic acquisition, not necessarily, but if we talk about paid acquisition, we see emerging some new tools that are I think like quite impressive and performing really well so far. Like for example, a lot of people start doing this, but Google has been a pioneer in this field, enabling advertisers to optimize an acquisition campaign towards a post-install event. That means if you're a retailer and an action within the app that has value for you is, for example, adding something to the basket, then you can optimize your campaign towards the people who are more likely to take this kind of action afterwards. I know it sounds a bit like unreal, and initially I had it's kind of surprising also because it's a fully automated tool and so on, but Google is a very data-driven company, and when you look at the numbers and when you look at the results that we have on some clients, and we're actually releasing some case studies tomorrow, it's very impressive. And that comes to your point about focusing. When you have an app and you want to make people download it, it's more than that. It's you want to make people download it and use it. So understanding what they do, what's their value, what's valuable for your business, not only the purchase, but what usually leads to a purchase, and then optimizing your acquisition towards this is the key. And not enough people actually do it out there, but the people who do are very successful.
Sure. So user context again is absolutely
Yeah.
essential, and
Yeah.
it's not just let's put this volume of advertising in to get this many installs and the story stops there once we've got our cost per install. It's about driving the actual specific point of value afterwards.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about cost of conversion, which again is really good for a pure play cost, and you're also thinking, Ollie, about cost per download or install. I'm thinking somewhere in the middle of you two guys, which is cost per engagement. That's
Right.
kind of, for me, what's important here. One other interesting thought in terms of getting people to download it is make sure the app has some unique functionality which makes it interesting to use, and why not put a waiting list on the front of it? Hey, you're in the queue. We're going to release it when you've got through. The whole Naked Wines business is built on a queue, and you're waiting on the waiting list to become an angel and to be welcomed into the family. And that could be a really nice way of marketing your app without having to pay people for it.
Interesting. Another one of those psychological triggers that are brilliant to press on.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we'll take just one final question, and this is a good one. So, if you were starting off a business, or you already had a business where you were selling big ticket items like RVs or yachts or houses, real estate, which technology route would you guys go in? Sam, why don't we start with you?
It's definitely true that Groupon conversion was lower on higher ticket items on app. I mean, our travel vertical being the best example. I think it's logically it's quite visual. If you're committing to a holiday, an expensive holiday, you want something pretty visual, and practically a large screen helps. But I'll go back again to the point of understanding the role that it can play in a user journey. We didn't stop selling travel deals on app because they converted worse than local. We looked at the journey and the role that an app played in pushing high ticket items. So for discovery, so people are often on the move and often daydreaming whilst commuting about holidays. So show it to them, but then ensure that there's a seamless flow to conversion on a desktop. So I think it's just, as with all this stuff, it's just thinking about exactly what the role is that it plays in ensuring that you have that journey, ensure that you're helping the customer through a funnel, even if the app isn't the final point of conversion.
Sure.
I would say if you're selling big ticket items like that, even though they're infrequent purchases, you absolutely need an app, because at the time when you're considering and researching and buying one of those things, you're probably going to be in and out of that website or brand or app a lot. And because it's a very visual purchase, because there's only sort of three or four things that matter, a picture of the house, a layout of the house, and the price of the house, you can deliver that experience really well in an app. You can swipe left and right, just like the eCommerce app does a brilliant job of. Those things are slightly harder to do in a mobile web experience.
Thanks, Benji. I thought I was going to have to bung you £5, but it looks like a tenner now. It's 2 plugs. Thank you very much for that one as well. So Leo, anything to add? You're selling yachts. Are you going to go for a multi-technology solution here as well?
I think I agree with what Benji just said. What we've seen, another stuff that we've seen, because one of the question in the research that we've done again was around like high value items.
Yeah.
And it seems, and again, like, you know, it's based on what we see, like from the user perspective. It seems like it's harder for them to purchase high value items within an app, but it doesn't mean that, as you just mentioned, it doesn't mean that the app cannot play a huge role in driving that purchase. And we're always coming back to, you know, this understanding of the full.
I mean, it strikes me as a really good one for PWA at the end of the day, which is acquire the customer in mobile web and transfer them into an app environment where they can start to explore, save to favorites, comment on things, ask for help from somebody in the central contact center. You know, there's a whole series of kind of loyal interactions that you can fathom in your head, and that migration of mobile web to mobile app could really work nicely.
Great. Okay, I think that's a good place to finish. And first of all, thank you guys for coming in and giving your time and your input. It's been fantastic educational experience for me, and I hope for everybody on the call. If what we'll be doing is sending out a follow-up with some of the poll results, we'll also gather up some of the resources we use to pull this together. Perhaps we might delay a couple of days to get your reports, Leo, on the...
it should go out tomorrow. So
brilliant, okay, so that would be fantastic to include in the pack. And obviously if you have any questions, anything you'd like to ask us direct, do contact us directly at eCommerce, either myself or drop us a line on the contact email. And the only thing remaining to be said is thank you very much for listening and have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.